Our topic is on the pediatrician's role in protecting a child from sexual abuse. Our second speaker finished her Doctor of Medicine at the University of the Philippines, Manila. She had her pediatric residency training at the University of the Philippines, Philippine General Hospital, and had her ambulatory pediatrics fellowship training in the same institution. She is a former child protection specialist at the Child Protection Unit, Philippine General Hospital. Currently, she is taking up Masters of Arts in Health Professions Education at the National Teachers Training Center in the University of the Philippines, Manila. She is presently a Medical Officer 4 at the Department of Pediatrics at Batangas Medical Center. Let us welcome our second speaker, Dr. Divina Francia D. Talosig. Good evening, Doctora.
For more than 3 months, that's from January 1, 2002 to April 3, 2002, 2,116 cases of violence against children were recorded by the Child Protection Network. These were from the reports of various WCPUs in our country. Among the reported cases, 1,530 or 72% were sexual abuse or assault. From this report alone, child abuse is indeed one of the ongoing problems that our children are facing. Good day, I am Divi, and today we will be learning about our roles in the protection of our children against sexual abuse, the major type of child abuse based on the previous report. Let's have a sample case. AAA, 15 years old female, came into your clinic with a chief complaint of pain on the genital area. She was accompanied by her mother. During the initial interview with AAA, she said that the genital pain happened 4 days ago after she was threatened to have sex by her 22-year-old maternal uncle. She said that was the first time that happened to her. That's why it took her 3 days to tell her mother what had happened. AAA said she was very afraid to go out of the house. She also cannot concentrate during her online classes. Her mother noticed that she was very quiet and lonely. That was the time she disclosed to her mother. They then went to your clinic for consultation. As AAA's pediatrician, what will you do? For us to help AAA, we should be able to define first sexual abuse. We should learn how to conduct an interview to a child with sexual abuse concern through face-to-face and teleconsultations. We should demonstrate the values of confidentiality, respect, compassion, accountability, and professionalism when conversing to a child with sexual abuse concerns. We should also recognize our roles as pediatricians to a child with sexual abuse concerns. Our children, based on RA 7610, refer to persons below 18 years of age or those over but unable to fully take care of themselves or protect themselves from abuse, neglect, cruelty, exploitation, or discrimination because of a physical or mental disability or condition. AAA is 15 years old, probably has an average intellectual performance, for she is able to perform in an online class. AAA meets the definition of a child. What if AAA is 19 years old with intellectual disability and performs like a 12-year-old child? Does she qualify as a child? Now that we recognized our children, we will now define abuse. Child abuse is maltreatment, whether habitual or not. It can occur once or repeatedly of a child, which include any of the following: psychological and physical abuse, neglect, cruelty, sexual abuse, and emotional maltreatment, any act by deeds or words which debases, degrades, or demeans the intrinsic worth and dignity of a child as a human being, unreasonable deprivation of his basic needs for survival, such as food and shelter, or failure to immediately give medical treatment to an injured child, resulting in serious impairment of his growth and development, or in his permanent incapacity or death. Sexual abuse, a type of child abuse, is any sexual act, attempt to obtain a sexual act or unwanted sexual comments or advances, or acts to traffic women's sexuality using coercion, threats of harm, or physical force by any person, regardless of relationship to the victim in any setting, included but not limited to home and work. Thus, sexual abuse is not exclusive to report of penetration or rape, for instance. It also includes other acts such as kissing, touching, posting or taking of sensual pictures or videos, provided that there is inequality between the victim's and perpetrator's authority, power, control, and developmental stage, be it physical, mental, or emotional. There is presence of coercion and absence of consent. With this definition, we can say that AAA was sexually abused. What are the possible effects of this incident to AAA? According to studies, child sexual abuse can increase the risk of developing post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety disorder, depression, low self-esteem, and social phobias. Child who experience sexual abuse is more likely to need hospitalization for mental illness, become victims of intimate partner violence and sexual abuse, and develop addictions to tobacco, drugs, and alcohol. They also have higher risk of developing obesity, sexual problems, irritable bowel syndrome, fibromyalgia, and sexually transmitted infections, including infection with the human immunodeficiency virus or HIV. Therefore, it is important that we protect our children from sexual abuse and recognize the presence of this abuse to address these effects. What if we encounter patients who have different complaints, such as dysuria, bleeding on the genital area, or bruises? How can we pick up presence of sexual abuse? Our history will be of great help. It comprises 90% of the diagnosis, just like diagnosing other diseases. Our history should follow the sequence of events as they happen and be obtained in a developmentally appropriate, non-leading, and non-suggestive manner. We must remember that it is not a forensic interview. Our goal is to formulate a diagnosis as to the physical and mental health of the child and look for possible evidence of abuse for us to have a guided management. We should take note that our history is part of the medical records, thus confidentiality must be observed always. Patient's profile are observations on behavioral and physical appearance of the patient, and the listed components comprise our history. The chief complaint may include the purpose of the visit and/or examination. We can also write the exact words of the child and the guardian. It is also important to note if the disclosure is voluntary or elicited, to whom the child disclosed to, and the circumstances during the disclosure. In the case of AAA, she said that her mother noticed some changes to her, which prompted the disclosure. To dig in, we can ask how the disclosure happened. We can also ask how her mother reacted and what did they do after. We can also ask if there were other people who knew about the incident. Now we can ask the patient about the incident. We ask about the hows and whats of the incident. When and where did it happen? Who did the act? And the times the incident or similar incident happened. Were there threats, be it verbal or physical? Were there witnesses? This was the statement of AAA during the initial interview. We can probe other data on the act by asking her to describe the sex. We cannot assume sex as presence of penetration. Sex to some children can mean touching, licking, or kissing of the genital parts and other parts of the body. Sex can also be described as patong by most younger children. Pumatong po si tito or si kuya. Then we can ask the details about the alleged perpetrators, his or her name or the nickname, birthday and or approximate age, relationship with the child, occupation, history of substance abuse and violence, criminal history, and current location and or known address. Current location of the alleged perpetrator is important in assessing the safety of the child. Some perpetrators may be living with a child or posing threats. We can also ask about the other components of the pediatric history, such as the review of systems, past medical history, mental and OB history for females, developmental and mental assessment, and psychosocial assessment. These components can lead us to presence of other medical, be it physical, mental, or behavioral problems, which needs attention and management. Now that we are familiar with the components of the history, we will now explore the approaches that we can apply to obtain those data. First is when the child talks freely at once. We can do free recalling prior to questioning. We give a short orientation and some instructions about the procedure, which is the history taking. Remember to emphasize confidentiality. Then we let the child to narrate the incident. If we have clarifications, we can do questioning. We should use open-ended questions, but we can also use other specific, direct or closed-ended questions and multiple choice questions when the child has difficulty remembering the details. For example, we can ask, where did the incident happen? Was it in your house, in the school, in the house of, let's say, your uncle? We can also ask the child to show or demonstrate the act. Summarizing what the child have said can clarify the details. Next, we can use the environment and relationships as memory aids. For example, if we are asking about where the incident happened, we can ask if it was near their house or near a park or school. Did the patient ride a vehicle to get there or she just walked? If we are asking when did it happen, we can ask if it was before or after the child's birthday, before or after Christmas or start of school. We can also ask if the incident happened before, during, or after a child's favorite TV show. We can also use general and neutral questions like, who are living with your house? Who do you love or don't love? What don't you love about, say, your uncle? We can also use anatomical drawings as memory aids. We can use sketches or dolls of a naked boy and a naked girl. We can use the sketches to name the body parts. We can then ask if the patient have seen this body part while pointing to the genitals, for example. Did anything happen to the patient's pointed body part? Then the interview will proceed. The last approach is we bring in the information. Some of the questions we can ask are as follows. But we should remember to never mention in the perpetrator's name and the act. They should come directly from the child. So again, here are the approaches that we can apply when we interview a child or adolescent. Previous slides discussed were very much applicable when we are doing a face-to-face consult, especially when we receive referrals or consults that are highly suspecting of abuse. Meanwhile, we can screen and recognize presence of sexual abuse while doing our telemedicine. During our interview, we can detect the present individual, family, and community risk factors. The pandemic posed factors which trigger child sexual abuse. Some of these factors are social isolation, lack of visibility, stressed caregivers, inaccessible safe zones, and others. We can also identify physical findings concerning for abuse, such as bruises, bite marks, and burns. We can also recognize psychological symptoms. During the consult, we should be observant in the interaction between the child and the caregiver, which can give us verbal and nonverbal cues. We should also be attentive to the demeanor of the child and caregiver. If the patient is able to do video consultation, we should be watchful of their background and home environment. This can give us hints that sexual abuse might be present. If we have doubts, it is recommended that we should do assessment face-to-face. Aside from knowing the components and approach to interviewing, it is also important that we are aware of some guidelines in interviewing. Display of respect, trustworthiness, and professionalism to the child and caregiver may lessen their fear of disclosure. Here are some of the guidelines. We can tell that the child that it is okay to talk about the incident with adults. The child should be separated from the parent for the interview if possible. We can build rapport by talking about non-threatening issues first. We should use open-ended, general questions and developmentally appropriate language. If the child is still unwilling to talk, we should not urge him or her to talk the abuse or offer reward after disclosure. If they are not ready, we can offer them to play for some time or set another time for the interview. As the primary pediatrician, we should record the interview word for word using quotation marks in the medical record. Using the child's own language, and the description of abuse should be attributed to the child. We should be supportive and empathic. We should not act shocked, outraged, or dismissive. As discussed at the start of the lecture, we should remember that the goal of our interview is to guide us in formulating a diagnosis to the physical and mental health of the child, leading to an appropriate management and decisions. As pediatricians, we have roles in suspecting and even recognizing child sexual abuse. Early recognition of child sexual abuse can bring timely intervention and prevention of future abuse. Let us remember that we are accountable. As mandatory reporters, we should report either orally or in writing to DSWD or LSWDO within 48 hours. Suspicion of child sexual abuse is enough in making a report. We can refer the child to rural health unit or to any WCPU in our area. We can also refer these patients to other service providers such as mental health professionals, counselors, law enforcers, and others. So here are the WCPUs in our chapter, as well as the reported cases from January 1 to April 3, 2002. First, Hospital ng Palawan, the Batangas Medical Center, De La Salle University Medical Center, and Quezon Medical Center. Today, we defined sexual abuse. We learned the concepts and approaches to conducting interview to a child with sexual abuse concerns in a face-to-face and teleconsultations. We also discussed some guidelines when conversing with a child for us to demonstrate the values of confidentiality, respect, compassion, accountability, and professionalism. Lastly, we recognize our roles and responsibilities to a child with sexual abuse concerns. Child abuse covers wide health concerns for our children. Pediatricians have major roles and responsibilities in child protection. To further learn those concepts, you may enroll free to the online training on 4 hours for women and child protection. The course can be accessed in the Child Protection Network and in the PPS website. So here are my references. And thank you for your kind attention.